Welcome back. Well, the ANC's National Executive Committee will be meeting in Pretoria today ahead of its Lekgotla over the next 3 days. Among the issues to be discussed is the report from the party's Integrity Commission. The Lekgotla is expected to deliberate on a way forward to be taken by the governing party on issues of, among others, service delivery. All right, let's get more on this story now and get some perspective from political analyst Ongama Mtimka. Ongama, thank you very much indeed for your time. Firstly, let's look at, before we get to the NEC meeting, let's look at some of the more pressing issues for President Cyril Ramaphosa's National Executive. I want to get your take with regards to this National Executive. Does it signal a greater urgency, do you think, to tackle poverty and improve government services?
I think the major issue for me going to the appointment of the cabinet was whether the president was showing commitment to overcome the years of state capture in terms of the people that he puts in, and whether he would have managed to stamp his authority within the party. When I saw the cabinet, I saw that there's quite a number of things that have taken place. The president not only has asserted himself, but has done so in a way that is non-zero-sum, in a way that still wins critical constituencies within the party. So, for example, I listened to Ace Magashule comment about the cabinet, and I saw that I think because of the innovation around the key criteria, and especially the areas of gender representation and geographic representation, that has helped to entrench, to give the president some leeway to be able to appoint a cabinet that he wanted. So I think he mostly got what he wanted then. In terms of the pressing issues for me, I think that leadership is the Achilles heel of our government. We do need a stronger approach, not just in terms of the personal competencies of ministers, but the ability to lead an entire bureaucratic machinery from national to province. And how that can be done is cannot simply be done by placing too much reliance on the structure itself. I think there needs to be even a more interventionist approach, even from a party level down the government chain of command, all the way to local government. And if you look at local government, for example, they've got a person who's equal to the task of bringing municipalities to account and greater performance. And as I say, you would need a more closely involved approach than you would have at any other time in the history of post-democratic South Africa in every portfolio. You don't need people who remain at national and just rely on reports being submitted in order for them to lead. You need people who actually are going to be very busy visiting provinces, visiting local municipalities before reports come to their offices to check on progress. And also, I mean, those time periods where ministers and MECs visit local municipalities are just too wide in between in order to drive the kind of urgent implementation that's required. So everything rests for me in capable leadership that is going to be strongly interventionist, strongly present throughout the bureaucracy from national to local government.
Well, let's analyze this capable leadership. The size of the National Executive is very much in the spotlight. Some, like the EFF, calling it bloated. It has been reduced, you would know, in terms of ministers from 36 to 28. Enough capable people there to serve the about 57 million people here in South Africa?
My sense is from a political experience as well as some industry specific experience, you have a number of people who come with great backgrounds. So I think it ticks the critical boxes for me, especially if you look at critical portfolios such as, for example, justice, because you need to drive a very strong, capable state there and support the National Prosecuting Authority. When the process of state capture and repurposing of state institutions was taking place, the security cluster was very key in that. And you've got people there who have got both the skills as well as the passion to actually ensure that there's performance. If you look at the economic cluster ministries, also there you've got capability. Also in terms of government frameworks as well as funding opportunities, for example, to stimulate the economic growth. You do have a lot of things, for example, sector intervention strategies, industrial policy that has been emerging since 1993 in South Africa, and speaks to the right things. All that's required is people who are not going to relax, but are going to ensure that there's implementation. And also, then what needs to be looked at critically, Blaine, are state banks, whether those banks, development finance institutions, whether they are at national or provincial, and particularly their risk appetite and the criteria that they use in order to give funding to SMMEs needs to be looked at critically. So you need people politicians who are going to be very much involved and who are going to employ competent people throughout the civil service.
Look, no doubt the economy is one of the pressing issues, and we know that the president has been on this, asking for international investment to come into South Africa. He's asking for about, 1.4 trillion rand over the next 5 years in various sectors. Do you think outside of our borders, Ongama, this cabinet, the economic cluster especially, it bodes well in terms of confidence?
Investor sentiment does tend to be fluid. Initially, it is based on impressions, but over time, in the short term, it tends to be very elastic and responds to perceptions quite very much involves to sentiment. But over the long term, investors that want to bring in factories and build look at even more fundamental indicators than things like other than investors that are just playing in the stocks market and bond markets. And the investments for us that we need, which create jobs in the long term, are those investors who are investing either in greenfields or brownfields industrial projects. So those investors, in my view, tend to do a lot more thorough investigation. So, for example, one of the things that they use is the competitiveness index, and that index is much more thorough than perceptions about the personalities of politicians that sits in certain positions. They tend to look at things like, for example, ease of doing business. They would look at the proliferation of infrastructure, the skills, the labor market, as well as the ability to secure suppliers that can make their factories to succeed. So we need to focus a lot more there. We've got special economic zones, which our research, which we've done in one of the special economic zones, for example, at Kucha, shows that those zones stimulate growth both for local investors expanding into them, but also foreign direct investment. And when it's local investors that are expanding, what you tend to see is that it tends to be more job creating, and the multiplier effect in the rest of the economy is quite higher because those businesses grow with their local suppliers other than foreign investors that come and have to be convinced to buy local.
You know, we're just watching some visuals of the swearing in yesterday of the various ministers, and something that stood out for me was the interaction with the Chief Justice and Patricia de Lille. And I think the Chief Justice whispered into her ear, "Did you see this coming?" And she was like, "No, I was also shocked." What do you make of Patricia de Lille's appointment?
I think it's a good one, Blaine. And for me, it's indicative of the genius of President Ramaphosa when it comes to stakeholder management and playing the political game. So my frustration with him is that I would have wanted to see a very, clinical cleanup exercise which doesn't accommodate any faction whatsoever. But I've seen that his approach, which is more, yes, indeed, use your power and show that you do have power, but don't do it in a way that makes you lose critical constituencies. So for me, the appointment of Patricia de Lille shows that propensity towards charm offensives for stakeholders that may even, sometimes you may not realize the immediate value of pursuing such a stakeholder. But I think what he would have inherited from the influence of President Mandela has shown in this cabinet.
Look, in appointing a new national executive, the president said he took a number of considerations into account, including experience, continuity, competence, and very importantly, generational mix as well. How would you describe his balancing act?
I think, by the way, Blaine, and I've been writing an article on this, that in that criteria was the president's master stroke, which helped him to even deal with some of the internal political issues in the party. So without a criteria, the outcome of the cabinet would have been a power dynamics between the two major contending factions within the ANC. But when you bring in criteria, what you do is you neutralize the influence of power in the process, and you ensure that the outcome, it tends to be on what's best from a rationality point of view, given the chosen criteria, rather than what is the compromised positions of the two contending factions. And I think this is why he was able, for example, to not have the current president of the ANC Women's League, but at the same time have a cabinet which is 50% women, which means in the bigger scheme of things, it's a victory for women, but not personally for its president. So for me, that criteria helped to kind of broaden the discussion to focus a lot more on principles, which, by the way, are in every conference resolution of the ANC, rather than the power dynamics within the party.
So you reckon the president is going to the National Executive Committee meeting this weekend emboldened, hands strengthened?
I think so, but also not having alienated people to the extent that they can mobilize constituencies. So it's going to take time for those that feel left out of the process to convince their constituencies that there's a cause to fight the president, because the outcome of the appointments was very inclusive. It drew from, even among the factions, it drew, by the way, except that from the Zuma camp, for example, from the pro-Zuma camp, it took more from provinces, and it took people whose commitment to that camp was not necessarily to personalities, but they happened to find themselves in that camp and can be easily swayed towards the new leaders.
All right. Ongama, thank you very much indeed for your perspective, your analysis. That was political analyst Ongama Mtimka. All right, let's take a look at our question of the day. It relates to this topic, what we were talking about with regards to Ongama. And we ask you, what are some of the pressing issues you would like to see this new cabinet or national executive. When we talk about national executive, we're talking about including the deputy ministers. What do you think the priority should be? Send us your thoughts at the agenda_SABC. We'll take a look at some of the comments in a short